Hey there, fellow knife nerds. We are looking today at a very requested steel. It's a new steel. How fun is it when a new steel comes out? SPY27. So in the last 12 months or so, Spyderco have developed and proliferated this steel in a number of their knives with the Crucible Metal Company. This is a Spyderco Native 5. This is like the mule team of folding knives. This is where you always find Spyderco's new steels or new steels they're trying. And it's a pretty good platform for an edge test as well because it's got a pretty ergonomic, comfortable handle. And yeah, there's lots of blades that are like this in the world. And I've indeed tested many natives over my days doing steel testing. So it's going to be a pretty standard Cedric and Ada gear and outdoors edge test. We're looking at the absolute apex of the knife, the particular sharpness until it stops slicing a held sheet of paper with the part of the blade that I'm testing. I've done this test about 350 times now, I believe, with many different knife steels over the last 4 years or so. It ain't perfect, but there's an FAQ video out there addressing probably all of your concerns. So I dare say I'll put that one in the end description or the comments or something like that, and you can always check on that if this is the first of these tests you're seeing. We cut twisted sisal rope with the knife. Twisted sisal rope is a pretty fibrous, nasty material that is, it reflects a lot of standard EDC use. This is a lot of boxes opened, a lot of tomatoes cutting twisted sisal rope. It's reflective of pretty decent edge wear on a knife. In this test, I'm going to do the factory edge first. This is a virgin SPY27 native, never cut anything. We're going to do the factory edge first. I think the factory edge looks to be about 20 degrees or so. And then we're going to put a 17 degree per side, mirror polished edge, the same edge that I do in all my tests, and going to see how that cuts. And that'll be sort of the one that's comparable to most of my other data. About 2.5 years ago, I switched from work sharp edges to these 17 degree per side mirror polished edges. I could be a little bit more specific than the work sharp was affording, so that's what we're looking at. With regard to SPY27, it's not a world-beating steel recipe. It's a modification, I guess. It's more of an incremental move towards easier maintenance and probably manufacture as well. So what they've done here is, if you think of S35VN, probably the most common decent knife steel that's going around, they've removed a bit of the vanadium, they've added a bit of cobalt and a bit of what's called niobium. Niobium is a carbide former that makes small, very hard carbides. Vanadium is also a carbide former, and there is still carbides of vanadium in here, but they are larger crystalline structures than niobium. So niobium very hard also, but finer. So the theory is, and this is from people who know more about steel than me, theory is this should be a finer grained steel with comparable, perhaps even lesser though, edge retention than S35VN. Maximum working hardness of this steel is 64, they say. That's according to my little knife steel app I use. It can always be changed and pressed, but that's what we're looking at in terms of a steel. The Rockwell hardness of this knife here, I don't know. I'm assuming it's 60 to 61. That's what the Spyderco generally run most of their sort of higher end steels at. So let's, without much further talking, I'll flash the stats up on the screen of all the things in the steel, excluding like the byproducts and waste products. But you're mainly looking at the carbon, vanadium, niobium, and your cobalt that are doing your cutting. And you got the chromium, which is forming carbides and also providing stainlessness where it is freed up, not being bound with carbides, chromium carbides. Anyway, you can hear much more about that if you look at Knife Steel Nerds, the website. He talks at great length about most steels, including this one. So I definitely push you towards Laren there if you're steel info hungry. At any rate, let's do what I do, which is mindlessly cut shit and see what the numbers are after that. That's more at my level. Alrighty, factory edge. Let's go. No worries. $150. No hang-ups. slow. $250. Still fun. $300. $300 on the factory edge. Pretty good result. Good factory edge. Let's see if I can improve it with my 17-degree fancy one, and I'll also be able to provide sharpening commentary as well. So use a KME sharpening system, color in the edge so I know what I'm getting, and I'll set it to about 17 degrees. I use an angle app on my phone to confirm that angle, which is obviously just a third-party app, so I don't know, I'm not using an atomic calculator, but I try my best, you know what I'm saying? Try my best. Do you know what I am saying? Alrighty. It's good. Just you want to have roughly a straight parallel line. If you were to grab a flat edge and have it go from the start of the blade to the tip, you want that to be roughly parallel with the jaws of the workshop on a smaller blade. Not workshop, KME on a smaller blade. Because I'm doing a slight reprofile, I'll start at 300, go 300, 600, 1500, then polish it with some leather strops or some diamond, maybe some diamond strops, I think. Yeah, I've got a few of those, so I'll use them. Oh, goodness. Looks like the factory edge was actually at about 17 to begin with. That's cool. I may not be improving on it as much as I usually do. Yeah, it's basically wiping off all the texture and not really making any leeway, any headway up the blade, so good on you, Spydercos. That's a cool factory angle. That's one I like anyway. Anyway, we'll just polish back what we've got. Little trick I do use, is I draw a little line across there, so I know if the blade's moving up or down. You just want it to stay as straight as you can. That's all. Little blue line and texture. Anyway, let's work through our stones, and I'll next time I see you, should be a nice polished edge. Okay, nice polished edge on there, reflective, erotic, you know how it is. So let's see if that has improved over the 300 it is cut. We'll just pick up the same old bit of rope, I've still got plenty left. And see how well it goes now. Usually it's a slight improvement in my anecdotal experience. So. Felt a little catch there. Happy to stop there at 430. 430 cuts. So factory edge, 300 cuts. My little shiny fancy man edge, 430. So always a little bit of improvement. Not saying I'm a great sharpener. I'm just saying that just putting work in just generally refines things a little bit. Let's see how it does at stain resistance. We're going to compare it to a couple of other steels as well, get our heads around that, shall we? Alright, so first I'm going to do a mustard blob test. I'm going to put a blob of mustard on an untarnished surface of each of these steels. Steels I'm choosing to compare are the Spy27 to S35 VN to HCR13 MOV, and then to D2 at the end here. So D2 is a semi-stainless, the other two should have various better levels of stainlessness. We shall see how Spy27 stacks up at resisting a mustard patina. First I will wipe them down with isopropyl alcohol, and then we shall apply mustard for an hour and see what happens. Now I'm off to play some Final Fantasy XII Zodiac Edition on the Nintendo Switch, while I let these babies time lapse away. So let's wipe off this mustard and see what's on the D2 steel, shall we? Smoosh there. Little stain on there. It's on the steel now, so you can't just wipe that off. Little mustard blob, turd-shaped stain. Let's look at the Spy27. Off it comes. Whoop. So a slight smudge there, but you see, especially compared to the, and I'll show you all these in a second, compared to the D2, you see it's definitely a lot less dark. Let's look at the, yeah, gross, mustard everywhere. Let's look at the S35 VN, so you just neatly wipe that off if I can, plop, off there. Again, a sort of, yeah, the smudges, it's there, but it's definitely nowhere near the D2. And then we'll look at the HCR13 Movi. Here, we'll go, oh, take that off. And that's definitely a stainless steel as well. So there's one way of testing stain resistance. I'll show you all of them now. Actually, I'll give them a wipe down and see what's actually left on there after I've properly cleaned them. See how that looks. Yucky, yucky mustard. Cold mustard on the fingers. Unpleasant. Alright, so I'll just give them a spritz of alcohol and see what happens. Wipe it off there. So really, D2, obvious staining. There's like it's almost like a greasy outline, but it's, I've wiped it down. So it's kind of changed the surface slightly, but nothing really And that's on all of them. You can see, I hope you can see there, this is in fairly HD. You can sort of see the slightly different shape there, just a little blob there. And that's on all of them. So this one's just above my finger there, this one's there, that one's there, and then of course there on the D2. So that's definitely a difference between a semi-stainless and stainless steels proper. But I think a more traditional test I like to do is just a saltwater solution test. So we'll mix up some salt water, put them each in a glass, fill the glass with salt water halfway up the blade, and see what happens after 3 hours. And that should be more telling. All right, so seawater, 35 grams per litre. Got a litre of water here. 35 grams of salt scale per litre. We're gonna make slightly saltier seawater. So we're gonna put 44 grams of salt in this water, make some extra salty seawater, and then we're going to leave the knives in the seawater for 3 hours. We'll see. So I'm going to fill up till most of the blade is covered in salt water and come back in 3 hours, I reckon, see how they look. Looks good. HCR13, S35VN, Spy27, D2. Remember, they're all wiped down with alcohol beforehand, so it should be a pretty even playing field. Let's go and see how they look in a little while. So they've been in here for way longer than I was intending. I got tied up on some serious shit. Basically, I was playing Final Fantasy 12, right? I got the key to the Barheim passage, so I'm like, oh, I'll go through the Barheim passage. And I ended up fighting Zalera, and that took like 5 goes to beat Zalera because you've got a 5-minute time limit. And then after I beat Zalera, which was great, I see there's like a through area to a place I wasn't sure where it went, so I went through and I was like, oh, I'm in the Garamsith waterway again. So I ended up doing like 3 hunts that I'd marked ages ago, and then I got all the way up to where I thought I was going to go, but it turned out I hadn't interacted with any of the sluice gates, so I couldn't take the easy way back into Rabanasta, so I had to go all the way back through the Garamsith waterway, which was at that point sprawling with Marlborough Kings, and then I had to go all the way through the Barheim passage, which was already I was under-leveled for, and then I finally got back into the Estes End. It was crazy. Knife guard problems, you know? Anyway, let's have a look at these blades. Let's get the camera up close to them. There's been some action. We'll see what you reckon. All right, so you can generally get a rough idea from the color of the water. So remembering 8CR, S35VN, Spy27, and D2. So let's look at the D2 first. This is like our what happens when a steel isn't super rust proof. You see you've got a lot of rust sort of leaking out, interestingly, from that point where the mustard was sitting on, but then also elsewhere on the steel. So you see it's got quite rusty there. Other side, not so bad. So it's generally been where the taint has washed from the point of mustarding. Let's get out the 8CR because this seems like the next worst one. So you see there, again, just rust is kind of like beaded all the way down there. Yeah, very airy. So we've got kind of, yeah, just generally rusty water around it. Slightly less rust proof than these two, which seem pretty similar. So you've got the S35V in there. Geez, it's barely, maybe at the edge there you're getting a little tiny bit of discoloration. And then the Spyder27, really, just around the Spydercos. That's a very common thing because the way the metal's so scuffed up there, it's like really high surface area, that area of steel. So, oh, hey Ada, how you going? So, yeah, that's about it. So, yeah, I'd pretty happily say that's the best out of the four. Very close to the S35VN anyway. And that's after 5 hours in extra salty, slightly saltier than seawater, composition, salt water. So what's my impression of Spyder27? Well, it's definitely an incremental change. So I don't think in reality you'd notice a huge deal of difference in your day-to-day use between this and S35VN. I did notice it took a polish very quickly and it seemed to have no issues being sharpened at all. It was actually quite a nice sharpen. Of course, I'm using pretty fancy man technology to sharpen my things, but generally that does translate into, you know, less fuss with burrs and things like that, which can be a bit of a bother when you're doing things like freehand sharpening and such. So overall, it's certainly a good steel. It's a very good steel and it seems to be priced as such. So it's priced, it's not like you know, it's cheaper than the S110Vs and stuff, like the super high carbide, really long lasting edge type steels, but then it's going to be also more expensive than your VG10s and things like that. So it seems to be about S35 or S45VN price range and performance. So it's really going to be a matter of nuance. I think this is probably more of a Spyderco assist. I think they're probably going to find themselves being able to maybe save belts in terms of doing the grinding, that sort of stuff. It might be having benefits in that side of things. And perhaps if knife makers eventually start using this stuff, or you know, just real kind of steel geeks, people who use steels for other things apart from just pocket knife users like myself, they may notice certain idiosyncrasies or nuances to the steel that make it really worthwhile. As it is now, it's a very worthwhile steel. If you have a knife in Spy27, it's in a very, very all-around steel is how I would, I guess, describe it. So that's the video, guys. Look, just this last little bit, I'll put some resources up on the screen for you to look into more of my tests and other stuff. In general, when I look at my spreadsheet, as I've changed sharpening methods over time, the results have changed. I think overall you've got a general trend in most steels. S35VN has always been better than most non-powdered steels, and you know, in the middle tier of you know, higher end steels, I guess. And Spy27 seems to fall into about the same level of edge retention and whatnot. So it's always interesting to play around with steels. It's definitely the part of the hobby that I really enjoy. And yeah, you generally sort of notice the differences the more you use these things as well. So if I pick up more knives in Spy27, I'll certainly be doing further investigations.